have an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering. Now, Friday nights and Saturdays were off limits for study. But other than that, I studied a lot. In fact, on Sundays, Sunday was my big day. I would typically study from noon until midnight, almost every Sunday. Yeah. And I lived in this dilapidated, for 3 years, I lived in this dilapidated off-campus house. Great place. It was a wonderful place. And this one particular Sunday, I was studying, and I have the window open because it's a nice day outside, there's a breeze coming through. I'm studying, and then all of a sudden I hear this. Do you know the song? Does it bring back memories of your disco days and nights? I know I saw you there. I saw you at the dance floor. And I know what you were wearing. But your secret is safe with me. This is I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. So, everybody knows and loves this song, right? Except for me, I don't really like this song very much. But after 4 minutes and 25 seconds of listening to that, I hear this. Again. I gotta listen to it again. Listening to a song you don't like once is bad, but listening to it twice, that's something else entirely. So the song, I listened to it again, and then after another 4 minutes and 25 seconds, I hear this. Again. 3 times. Okay, this went on and on and on. So I decided to break for lunch. Okay? I took a break, and I made my lunch. The song went on over and over and over and over again. And this was the era before you could cue the song with the press of a button. So sometimes the difference, the gap between the songs was 5 seconds, sometimes 10, sometimes as long as 30. So the point here is that whoever was playing the song over and over again was doing it intentionally. It was a turntable, and they were going back and cueing the record. After lunch, it kept going. I gave up, and I went to the library. So this this song was played, no doubt, by the 50-ish woman who lived next door. And I lived next door there for 3 years, and so I saw her many times, but I didn't really have a relationship with her. I'd see her on the sidewalk, and she'd generally have this blank look on her face most of the time. She might say hi, but pretty much looking beyond me. And I was kind of the same. I mean, I really didn't care about her. I was all caught up in my studies and college drama, stuff like that. But she played this song over and over and over and over again. Then one day I was at the same library, and on my way home, I decided to stop into this coffee shop, a diner. On the way home, I stopped in, and there she is. She's working the counter of this diner. She recognized me, and she actually gives me a nice warm hello, and I give her a hello. I sit down, I have a cup of coffee, a donut, and it was kind of slow at the diner, so we were able to have a conversation. And I found her to be actually really surprisingly very warm. I never really got that from her before. She was very warm, very kind, almost motherly. She was like wondering, as a college student, if I'm getting enough to eat and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. She may have given me an extra donut. I don't remember. But she was I left there feeling that I had a real conversation with a real person outside of my typical student, folks that I would run with. Well, a couple months later, I'm on the front porch of my house talking with a neighbor friend of mine, and I hear the song come on again and again. And I go to my neighbor, what's up with that? Why does she do that? And he said something that kind of reoriented me. He said that her husband, for several years, was emotionally, physically abusive to her. Emotionally and physically abusive to her for several years. And then finally, she had thrown him out. And she had to raise her two children on her own. And one of her children, who was now a young teenager, was severely developmentally disabled, required a lot of attention. So that song kind of took on a new meaning for me. That maybe she just needed to hear that song over and over and over again to replenish her self-confidence, replenish her self-worth. Something that I hate to say was likely beaten out of her. That she had to hear that over and over again. Here's another story. Hopefully I can connect it to the first story and to the theme of this sermon, which I'm going to get to. I'm going to get to that. I was reading this article, this interview about this guy who lived in the wilderness for like 3 decades, off the grid in like a log cabin. Completely off the grid. He made a living leading some wilderness excursions and did some writing and some lecturing, but pretty much he spent all of his time in like Wyoming or Montana or somewhere, I don't quite know where. Cabin in the woods. And one day he was giving a lecture at some local college, and some young woman comes up to him and says, after the sermon, or after the lecture, I'm inspired by your work. You have inspired me to want to save wolves. And the guy's like, I'm paraphrasing here, great, tell me about your work with wolves. And the woman says, well, actually, I've never met a wolf. I've never actually even seen a wolf. But I want to save them. So that's the second story. Now when I was thinking, there's a third story. When I was thinking about going into UU ministry, I wanted really nothing less than to save the world. Right? I think a lot of UUs want to do that. They want to save the world. I wanted to make that my life. So I decided to be a UU minister. So I show up to seminary, and I'm all ready to learn about theology and ministry and blah, 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 justice, whatever. And I get there, and they basically say, no, stop. Turn around, go back home. Go back to your community. Go back to your community and be present with. Go work in your community. Be present with the marginalized in your community. The dispossessed, the outcast, the homeless, the hungry, those looking for work, those addicted to drugs, those who are incarcerated. That's what they said. Go back and work in your community 8 hours a week for an entire year. And by the way, don't fix anything. Just show up. Just show up. Don't fix anything, just show up. And I'm thinking, man, what a buzzkill. What a buzzkill. Hey, weren't you listening to me? I want to save the world. No, we're not going to have any of that. Go back to your community. So I go back home to Washington, Pennsylvania, and I start working with this organization serving the homeless called Family Promise of Southwestern Pennsylvania. It's a national network, but I'm working with the Washington chapter. I spend 8 hours a week working in churches, actually, that were temporarily housing homeless individuals. I go to different churches every week, okay? And I got to know all kinds of families in all kinds of crazy situations, all kinds of families facing all these horrible things that actually happened as a result of very normal things. Car breaks down and all this other stuff tumbles. They end up homeless. But I also met some people who had such incredible optimism despite facing such difficult circumstances. And I saw some dysfunction, but not as much as you might think. Not as much as you might think. On a typical evening, we'd say grace, we'd have dinner, we'd read books to the children there, We'd play with the children, they'd go to bed, and then I'd listen to story after story after story of people who were homeless, story after story over cup after cup of very bad coffee. Okay? So, there's 3 stories there. So you've all likely heard of the theory of trickle-down economics. I first heard it back in the 80s. I'm driving down the road in my 1978 green Dodge Omni, 2-tone green, it's pretty mean, 2-tone green Dodge Omni, and I'm listening to NPR, and there was this economist on being interviewed who was talking about trickle-down economics, and the theory is that if those at the top are doing well, the benefits that they accrue will trickle down to benefit those at the bottom. Now, many of you feel that that's kind of problematic. It's just simply too easy for those at the top to siphon off their share, then more than their share, then even more of that, leaving nothing left to trickle down to those at the bottom. And actually, in today's version of trickle down, there's nothing left to trickle down to the middle. That's what's scary. But this economist was saying, hey, I have a problem with trickle-down economics. Maybe it should be the reverse. Maybe it should be trickle-up economics. Maybe if the people in the lowest rungs of society had access to capital and funds and resources, that they could spend that money on the goods and services that they deem appropriate, that satisfies their needs. And those manufacturers who manufacture those things will be rewarded by those purchasing those gifts or those products and not others, so that wealth would trickle up to them. Got it? Trickle up economics. So I started to think about my social justice efforts, how I spend my time regarding social justice. I started to think, are my efforts trickle down or they trickle up? Maybe you're a little confused here, because I was, well, let's see, that was a long time ago, that was 30 years ago. But let's say I'm reading the newspaper, and I read that the governor has taken away or cut funding for public schools, and that as a result of that, the schools that are in the most depressed areas, the most marginalized areas, will suffer the most. And I get upset about that. And I decide to call my state representative, and I tell my friends to call their state representative in an effort to get that funding restored. Is that trickle down, or is that trickle up? Let's say I'm concerned about homelessness in my community, and I want to do something about it. So I call my city councilman, and I tell my friends to call their city councilmen and women, and we try to get some funding for homeless shelters so that they can better serve the homeless in our community. Is that trickle down, or is that trickle up? Still confused, I'm sure. One more scenario. Let's say I go to a Black Lives Matter demonstration, and I raise my voice to the powers that be to say that this is not acceptable of the racial profiling in my community, and I'm upset and I want it to end. Is that trickle down or trickle up? Okay. My intent here is not to knock any of those initiatives that I just described. They're fine. The initiatives themselves are fine. But what I wanted to ask myself is, what's the context of those social justice initiatives? What's the context? Have I ever seen a wolf? Do I have a relationship with the woman who needs to hear the song, "I Will Survive," over and over and over again during a typical day, simply to just get through that day? When was the last time I was actually in a public school? Do I have a relationship with any homeless people? Do I know any of them? Have I been in a homeless shelter? Do I know where they are? Do you know any people of color? Do you know what it's like for them to go into a Giant Eagle grocery store and be followed by employees? Do you know what it's like for someone to get pulled over by the police simply for failing to signal a lane change? And if the answer is no to those questions, I would call those initiatives trickle down as opposed to trickle up. So what does the arc of trickle up justice bend toward? What does the arc of trickle up justice look like? I believe it bends toward relationships, individual relationships. And I believe that it looks like something very similar to what my seminary asked me to do in my first year. That's what I believe it looks like. Stop, turn around, go out in your community, and be present with those who are dispossessed, the marginalized, the outcast, the homeless, the incarcerated, the drug addicted. That's what it looks like. And it starts by not fixing anything. Not fixing anything. Restrain that egotistical impulse that we have to fix stuff. That we know how to do stuff. That we're successful, we know what you need. Stop that kind of stuff and resist the egotistical impulse that thinks, you know, deep down I'm kind of uncomfortable and maybe possibly guilty that others in my community are suffering, and that maybe the reason I do these things is simply just to remove that guilt, that discomfort. We got to resist that. We have to live with that. So trickle-up justice begins by being present with those in our community, not doing for, being with. Being present with those in our community. And it's not judging, not wondering how a situation developed, how people got to the place where they're at, who's to blame, none of that. None of that. Just be present with them, where they are, as they are. So this year, as a new adult faith development class that I am going to be leading here at First Unitarian, available to youth as well, others at the cluster, I'd be welcome their involvement as well. I'm going to lead basically the same initiative that I had to do in my first year of seminary. But instead of 8 hours a week, which is a big commitment, you can do as much as you want, but we're looking for a 2-hour commitment. 2-hour commitment. You can work where the Spirit moves you. You can do whatever you want. You can be a hospice volunteer. You can work at East End Cooperative Ministry. You can teach English as a second language. You can tutor in school. You can work in a library. Work in a suicide prevention hotline. Mentor incarcerated individuals. You can do whatever you want. Whatever you want. And you don't have to really do anything. Just show up. Just show up and see what happens. This is a commitment though. But you'll find that it's not a commitment to the homeless. It's not a commitment to those who are incarcerated or drug addicted. It's a commitment to yourself. Because you are not going to change. You're not going to save the world. That's not going to happen. But I guarantee you will change the world. And that change will actually begin with you, not with them, not with those you're calling to serve. It will begin with you. What I found when I did this work for an entire year, that over the course of that year, I discovered that I had these barriers between myself and those who I was serving. That they were invisible when I started. But over the course of the year, I could see that I had them and that they were being kind of dismantled over the course of 8 months, 9 months when I did this. That's what I saw. And you don't even realize it that it's happening. Just kind of, as I said, over the course of the years when I kind of discovered it was happening. And In a strange, weird way, it was the first time I ever connected with the Buddhist idea of non-self. Have you ever heard of that? That there is no I, and that there is no me, and there is no you. That was the first time that kind of like light went on. That there is no other, there is no them, there is no those people, there is no homeless, there is no ghetto, there is no prison. And although these people, right, are facing horrible situations in some bizarre way, it's actually ridiculously beautiful that these walls are coming down. And although they do face desperate circumstances. So removing these barriers, invisible barriers that we don't know exist, I don't know, we can argue about it, but I think it might be the most important aspect of ministry. It might be. David and I can talk about that later. But this relationship and breaking down of barriers, realizing that there is no other person to be saved, fixed, or helped, I believe that it will bring authenticity to any social justice initiative that we then wish to pursue. I think it'll breathe a wholeness into such initiatives. And I think with this, what needs to be done, if we have those relationships, what needs to be done from a social justice perspective will appear out of the fog. It will be simple. It won't be complicated. It'll feel organic, right, and true, rather than a top-down approach that we think we know what needs to be done all the time. I believe we have to do this work. I know I have to do this work because I have barriers. I think we all do. And as soon as you stop doing the work, it's like your mind wants to start building those barriers back up again. We got to be really on top of that. So I need to do this work. So this year, we'll be taking this, undergoing this initiative here at First Unitarian as an adult faith development class. And I would love, 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 love to have you be a part of it. Join us. Why is the song going off again? Am I talking? That's great. Don't be petrified. At one point, I knew the whole song, the words to the whole song. So, see me after service downstairs if you want more information or sign up for this. So again, you will not save the world. But again, and actually saving the world is the wrong way to think about it. Those who want to save the world don't even see that they have these barriers around them. They don't see that. Saving the world is not really the question or the goal. The only thing you can change really is yourself. And that's what I guarantee that will happen. And that's a beautiful thing when you realize that happened and those barriers come down. So let this work, let this commitment be a gift, a healing gift for yourself. And in the words of John Kabat-Zinn, initiate giving. Don't wait to be asked. See what happens, especially to you. May it be so. Please rise in body or in spirit for the singing of hymn 318, We Would Be One, to be found in our very hymnal.